right, we are live with Dr. Sage Wheeler, Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine. We met in Washington. I forget the name of the town, but about an hour outside of Seattle, and he gave an incredible speech. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sage Wheeler.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you may want to come on a little into the middle of the camera. I'm seeing just half of you. There you go. Cool. Um, yeah, Dr. Wheeler, why don't you start with just telling everyone who you are, what you do, where your practice is located, and how you got into medicine.
Sure. I'm Sage Wheeler. I'm the owner and medical director of Sage Med in Bellevue, Washington. I got into naturopathic medicine from personal experience. I was actually a pre-med student, and I was going to go into conventional medicine, looking into orthopedics or emergency medicine. And then I hurt my back, and I went through the mainstream medical system, and it didn't really do anything for me. And so I started to question, like, is this really what I want to do? It didn't really seem like they had a lot of great answers or effective therapies. So then I kind of recontemplated, what I want to do with my life. Do I still even want to go into medicine? But fortunately, my grandma called me. She said, you should go see my naturopathic doctor. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. and so anyway, I went to see this guy, and it was a fascinating experience. He was like a blend between a doctor, an acupuncturist, and a chiropractor. He just used whatever tools he felt would best serve his patients, and it was fascinating. So then I researched, how to get into that, and I found out about Bastyr University as an accredited program where you can become a licensed physician to practice naturopathic medicine. And I thought that was pretty great. And upon graduation, I did my residency in something called integrative medicine, where I practiced half my time with a conventional doctor in family practice, and the other half the time I was with a naturopathic doctor in family practice. So I got to see both sides of the medicine, and a lot, a lot of advantages to both and to integrating them. So I really practice more as an integrative clinic than a classical naturopathic clinic, because there's good things that conventional medicine has to offer, particularly all the modern diagnostics are very helpful for some of the complex and chronic diseases. And sometimes if you got pneumonia, you just need to take some antibiotics so you don't die. There's practical applications for conventional medicine. Mm-hmm. And then during my residency, I got into nutrigenomic medicine, which is looking at people's genetics to identify underlying, pitfalls that get in the way of them achieving their optimal health. And I became fascinated with that. And I think the combination of the integrative medicine approach with the nutrigenomics really kind of set me apart. And my practice grew very rapidly because I was having good success with conditions that are considered very difficult to treat: fibromyalgia, chronic depression, autistic spectrum disorders, anxiety. So it was a new thing at that time. This was maybe about 7 years ago. Now, nutrigenomics is very popular, and it's not quite as, exclusive of a thing, but we still get a lot of interest in it because it's being offered, I think, maybe a little bit casually. Especially, there's a lot of stuff on the internet where you can just have your genes tested, you can buy some supplements, you can start messing with things. And I now specialize in helping people who kind of messed themselves up and need to kind of unwind what they did to themselves using some pretty powerful supplements. Methylated folate especially can really mess people up if they don't really need that much. And so now my emphasis has been a little bit different in that I'm not strictly educating people about nutrigenomics and what it is, but also helping people understand what it's not and how to not hurt themselves and get carried away with it. because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And as you know, you saw during my lecture, uh, teaching people not to treat those single nucleotide polymorphisms that we call SNPs, not to chase after their genetics, but really just evaluate their life. And I have a lot of people come in and they're completely healthy, and they have this genetic report, and they say, how can I fix this? And I just say, well,
Go home.
what do you mean? You feel great. You
Yeah.
don't need to fix anything just because there's a little red mark on your genetic report. So I do a lot of that kind of education nowadays, now that people are more aware of nutrigenomics. It's kind of trying to rein in the excitement and help people to take a very rational approach to it. And don't forget those underlying foundations of health, which is, as you saw, I spend most of my time reminding people are the most important aspects of it.
The sunlight, the breath, all of the stuff that people take for granted. Good sleep.
Right. Good sleep,
Yeah.
healthy diet, clean water, clean food.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're really into detox,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an important aspect of it. A lot of people can get a nutrigenomic report. They can see that maybe they have issues with methylated folate, glutathione production. So they really open up those pathways by supplementation, and they become really toxic. All that stuff stored up in their body, all of a sudden it's getting released. And there's something called the redistribution effect that happens when you suddenly detox, and it makes you feel like crap. It's not good.
Mm-hmm.
So gently, detoxing people just by supporting your natural pathways, and good old fashioned exercise, sweat, clean diet, clean water. Most importantly, I think, as far as detox goes, is identifying the source of the toxin, right? Like, toxin is such a generic word. What is it? What is it specifically that you're detoxifying? Is it mercury from eating too much tuna? Is it lead because you work in a shipyard? Antimony or chloride because you work in an aluminum smelter? Like, where is it coming from, and what's your exposure? Oftentimes, if you can identify that, your body will detox on its own. You really don't need to do that much to support it. Just kind of like get out of your own way a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I want to circle back for a second because I remember the first few minutes of your speech. One thing that really spoke to me is when you said, listen, guys, I'm not here to bash Western medicine because there's a time and a place for it, and there's also a time and a place for pharmaceutical drugs. This is what you said in the beginning of the speech. And when I got super sick and almost died basically for 3.5 years, when I came out of it, I was so anti-government, anti-medicine, like anti-everything. And then I realized that that's actually not a winning approach to like meet the opposite end of the war, the opposite pole of the war. I'm not helping anybody actually. I'm just perpetuating, the problem. So when you said that, it's all about getting the patient better at all costs, whatever it takes to get the patient better. And if that takes some antidepressants sometimes, fine, and it's really, really important. And I feel like in this field that we're both working in is to not be bashing anybody, right? Because that essentially you're not helping anyone. You're not coming from that love vibration, that love frequency of pure healing, of helping, So I really, really appreciated that when you said that, and it was really beautiful. And when you said that, I was all ears from that point forward. And your speech was absolutely beautiful. And I'll have it on YouTube by the time people listen to this, it'll already be up on YouTube. So yeah, that was great. So why don't we go over now what you said? You said you had your back was injured, right? You went to Western standard medicine and they weren't able to help you. What eventually did you find that was able to help you? What did the naturopathic or the integrated medicine doctor do? The badass that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had injured my back. Specifically, I had slipped a disc, and because it went untreated for almost 2 years in the mainstream medicine, it had started to grow bones around it called osteophytes. And so these are sharp pieces of bone that are actually growing towards my spine. And so his approach is really simple. He gave me an adjustment. So he actually put his hands on me and like cracked my spine, and I had immediate relief, about 80% just from that one adjustment. So sometimes, adjustment can make a back pain worse. Sometimes it makes it better. you got to be sure to go to a skilled provider, before doing that. But in my case, it really, really helped. So I immediately wanted to learn how to do that, how to put my hands on something and actually move physical structures in the body and relieve that pressure and increase that range of motion. Um, and then he was very honest with me, and he said, "You're overweight. That's why you're not getting better. So you need to lose about 40 pounds, take the weight off your back, decompress that disc a little bit, clean up your diet, hydrate better." And I was active. I snowboard, I rock climb, and I didn't do any of that stuff once I hurt my back. And so I was still eating the same like an athlete, but I wasn't living an athletic life. So I put on a lot of weight since the injury, and that was keeping me from getting better.
Mm.
So just being honest with me, and it's an interesting thing about this guy. He's blind, been blind since about 14 years old.
Wow.
And so he did all this without taking a history or anything. It was kind of odd, and I don't do this, but he just had me lay down on the table, and he felt everything, and he told me what was wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "I can tell you have a back problem. I can tell that you're overweight, and you need to do this and this and this." And he even like picked on my little. I had a little Hawaiian or little necklace that was all popular in the '90s.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Take that off. It's it's messing with your nerves, in your shoulder, and you shouldn't sleep with that on." It's every little thing that he felt. It was fascinating. So I wanted to learn how to be hands-on with my patient. I wanted to learn how to, start from those low force interventions and then work my way up to higher force interventions. In naturopathic medicine, we call that the therapeutic order. And that's this philosophy is what makes us comfortable practicing integrative medicine, having those powerful pharmaceutical tools in our hands, or even some surgical interventions. I also do PRP injections. I do prolotherapy. So when do you use those? What's that?
What's PRP?
Oh, PRP is platelet-rich plasma.
Okay.
When we extract some blood from your body, we extract concentrate the plasma with all the growth factors and platelets, and we re-inject it into damaged structures like a torn tendon or something.
Okay.
Or a chronically debilitated shoulder. It's cool stuff, but it's pretty invasive. We're putting a big needle into a body part. So we follow that therapeutic order. And start with like what this doc did. Told me to lose weight, told me to exercise more, told me to eat better, drink more water, and then one level up, he put his hands on me, he moved some things around, things went snap, crackle, pop, and I felt better. And then we kind of consider herbs and vitamins in that kind of lower level. And then there's more potent things that we call nutraceuticals, and this is the really concentrated megadose stuff like active folate and some of these amino acid compounds that are pretty potent. 5-HTP, GABA, L-theanine, glycine. So this stuff is almost like a pharmaceutical, but it's not regulated like a pharmaceutical. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very careful with those. Those are third level interventions. And then we go up to pharmaceuticals and higher level physical interventions like injection therapies and things like that. And then, the highest level, we refer out to surgery, or we refer patient out to specialists for even higher force pharmaceuticals. As long as you start at the bottom, you do a good job at every level in that therapeutic order, you can use all kinds of medicine safely. The problem with modern medicine isn't what they're prescribing, it's how quickly they prescribe it. Mm-hmm. I had a patient come in, she had a bad day, stayed up all night vacuuming because she was mad at her husband. She went and saw this psychiatrist, and the doctor put her on four prescriptions on her very first visit. Put her on an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety med, an antipsychotic because he thought she was bipolar because she stayed up all night vacuuming, and something else I don't remember. And so 4 prescriptions in one visit.
Yep.
And that's insane. But that's not even following conventional standard of care. And she comes to me, and of course she feels like a zombie, has no emotions, and we do an evaluation, and we find, okay, well, why are you mad at your husband? Well, he invested all of our savings without asking me, and he lost it all. you should be pretty
Feel
mad.
the
You know,
anger.
you
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
steal my vacuuming.
yeah,
You don't kill him. You know,
yeah.
and what else is going on in your life? Oh, I'm having hot flashes and all this. I think I'm going into menopause. And sure enough, she was. So, got into counseling for, dealing with the anger and her husband losing their savings. Got into some hormone replacement therapy to manage the menopausal symptoms. 90% better right there. Got off all the meds and just said, just stop that before it gets in your system. And stopped all that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fine tuned with a little nutrigenomics, a little methylated folate for some mood support. Bam, she's great.
Wow.
And so just follow that therapeutic order. It makes all the difference. And you can not be afraid of those big guns, when you need them. As long as you can look back at your health history and say, did I really do everything I could have done prior to committing to taking this pharmaceutical that may permanently alter my neurochemistry? And if you really have, then maybe that's the right choice for you. Maybe that little bit of Prozac is genetically what you need to get a balanced brain chemistry. It's not like you were born with a Prozac deficiency, but you may have other issues that could be that's the icing on the cake. And if you do everything before lifestyle, diet, nutrigenomics, maybe the dose you need is a very very small dose that's not going to cause much in the way of side effects. Whereas if you just skip all that and jump right to a doctor who just throws some Prozac at you, you end up on a very high dose with a lot of side effects, and you still don't feel good. And people think, oh, that's a terrible drug. It's an awful thing. I never want to use that. People who prescribe that are crazy. Just doing big pharma's will. But if you follow that therapeutic order, any intervention could have a place, for you and your optimized health. And when you strictly are dogmatic about natural versus conventional, I think people in both those camps end up suffering because they're missing out on something.
Mm. Yeah, there's an expression, the eagle meets the condor. It's like a Native American expression in talking about when the world will really change is when the eagle will meet the condor, which is essentially Western medicine meets Eastern medicine, as opposed to,
Yeah,
in opposition to each other. And it's really true because through my detox, I've been in this camp of like natural, 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 but a lot of the supplements I take are synthetic, are man-made, so
yeah,
they are created through science. Excuse me. I had a lot of conversations yesterday, so I lost my voice a little bit. But yeah, um, totally agree with you in that when they meet with each other, which is I think happening right now. I'm grateful for that on this planet. That I think that huge shifts can be made. How do you feel about these antidepressants or these medications, kind of dimming the spiritual energy or dimming, any like sort of high frequency, how do you feel about something like that? That's been a concern of mine.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's a very legitimate concern,
Hmm.
and it comes back to utilizing them outside of that therapeutic order, where a lot of people haven't really done the work. I've had a lot of people come in and say, yeah, after my partner died, my doc put me on these meds. And it's like, how are you supposed to process? How are you supposed to feel? And how are you supposed to heal spiritually if you're just numbing those emotions? So I think that's a really inappropriate use. Um, but we want to be able to get back into the fast paced, consumer based life in America. So we don't want to spend a month grieving and spending time, alone or reminiscing and processing. We want to go back to work the next day, and we want to numb ourselves to those emotions with pharmaceuticals or alcohol or drugs, and that's completely inappropriate. Whereas if you have a person who has been through counseling, has been on a spiritual journey, has evaluated their health, has detox, has done all those orders, all those therapeutic steps, and it's like I really just can't quite get that balance, and that little touch of something just brings them into balance, and that's the appropriate way. But especially with kids, I see a lot of medicated kids, and it's like there's no way they've had time to go through that therapeutic order. And and they're growing. It's a painful process. You're supposed to have angst as a teenager. You know, you're
Hmm.
supposed to have trouble focusing
On
when
the
you're sitting
boring
there.
curriculum, right? What if they
Right.
didn't have trouble focusing, they'd be in trouble, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's like, oh, hey, what's wrong with this kid? He can't sit here for 8 hours and listen to a standardized curriculum. That I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's very there's way overused. I probably use pharmaceuticals maybe 5% of my patients.
Hmm.
So I, there's a place for them, but I don't want to make it sound like there's a big place for them.
Right.
It's a very, very small place for them. But it's all about changing your philosophy and committing to that therapeutic order. So when you get to that place where maybe you are in the 5%, you need something. You feel comfortable doing it, and you don't feel like you're giving up or cheating. Some of these are great, very, very innovative actions on the body that just balance certain things you need balance. Some of them, like I said, like in the case of antibiotics, that drives me nuts when people are so natural that they won't take antibiotics and they're dying of pneumonia or something, or they
Hmm.
won't give their kids antibiotics and they're getting diagnosed with strep throat. And if that's not treated with antibiotics, they can develop rheumatic fever and they can have kidney failure later on in life, all sorts of issues, heart failure. So sometimes there's a reason to use a pharmaceutical that maybe the person doesn't understand. It's not just about killing the bug, but it's about preventing long-term side effects. Diabetics, for example, can be treated with diet and exercise. I've reversed hundreds of cases of diabetes just with diet and exercise. But until you get to that point, there's good evidence diabetics should be on an ACE inhibitor. It decreases the rate of kidney damage. So, when you get them to be not diabetic, you can stop that medication.
Mm.
You
Have you
shouldn't
ever been
avoid
able
it. It's all natural.
have you ever been able to reverse diabetes after insulin is started, or is that actually impossible? Because
No, I have one case,
wow.
an, in very interesting case of adult onset type 1 diabetes. So he was having an autoimmune attack on his beta cells, and he was insulin dependent, and but it was very, very early on, and we were able to balance his immune system, put him on a very, very low carbohydrate diet, ramp up high intensity exercise, and we were able to reverse it in about a year.
Wow.
So that was pretty awesome. And then I've had a handful of type 2 diabetics who have gotten so bad that they have become insulin dependent as well. And those are difficult. Um, and But yeah, it is possible. The longer you're on insulin, the less possible it is,
Mm-hmm.
though. So all these people were just newly insulin dependent, and they'd only been on it for a couple months, and we were able to reverse the trend. It's usually at that point where people become insulin dependent, where they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to do something," and they get desperate enough to go see a naturopathic
Wow.
doctor. And we just have to push them. We have to push them really hard to get high enough intensity in their exercise and strict enough diet to reverse that. But it is possible.
Wow. I want to circle back for a second. I forgot to say, as you were talking about the small 5% window for pharmaceuticals, it made me think of my journey. And, I briefly told you my story, but,
Right.
for 3.5 years, I went through, terrible, terrible depression, anxiety, panic attacks. And one thing that really came to my rescue when, at the right times was a benzodiazepine, Klonopin. Like I was
Right.
totally freaking out. Looking back, it's definitely detox reaction combined with just all kinds of terrible biochemistry, everything out of whack, mercury circulating through my system, and of course, many, many more. That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? We don't even know the full picture of a panic attack, but um, Klonopin came to my rescue, and another time I remember being in the mountains of Peru, dealing with like debilitating food poisoning, and I had all of these herbs at my disposal. Herbs, colloidal silver. The only thing I didn't have is charcoal and binders, like I know about now. That maybe would have helped me, but essentially, I gave it 7 days, of trying these natural remedies. I was like 20 pounds lighter, emaciated, on the verge of honestly what felt like I was going to die. I was honestly fading in and out of consciousness because I had just gotten done with 20 ayahuasca ceremonies in the Amazon. So I was deep, deep on the path, deep in the journey. And then of course I went to a Peruvian hospital and they gave me, a few injections, and I was the next day I was fine, fine, So
Exactly.
there is a time and place for it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be all natural. That's dogma.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say there's a difference. You can be. I like to say what I practice is rational medicine.
Mhm.
It's not purely natural. It's not conventional. It's just rational. Does it make sense to do this at this time? And that's what I would hope the wave of the future would be just rational medicine where we can all stop being so dogmatic and just evaluate the evidence and see what's going to be best for the patient, and also not be so dogmatic about what we consider evidence. Not everything has to be a double-blinded placebo-controlled study.
Mm.
Those are very expensive, and a lot of people, no one's going to pay for a double-blind placebo-controlled study of natural products. No one's going to profit that much from them in order to pay for that. We have to be able to look at other kinds of evidence, historical use, and the more anecdotal it is, the more history you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's used an herb for 1,000 years and has shown that it has this effect, yeah, that's anecdotal, but it doesn't mean you should disregard it. It's 1,000 years of evidence.
Wow.
So we always want to have good evidence, but I think that I see a growing trend of skeptics and what I call the religion of scientism, where people are attacking what I consider rational thought, becoming very dogmatic about science. And I think that we see people on the natural side that are also just as dogmatic
Yeah,
about being all
the
natural.
vegan
Like, what does that even
community.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just encourage people to be rational minded, not get sucked into dogma, and really just try to help people feel better following that therapeutic order. And
Mm.
I think you really can't go wrong. Follow therapeutic order. Be rational. Uh, don't be a jerk. Practice random acts of kindness, and you're gonna get better. You're gonna
Mm.
get better. There's a lot of information out there with the internet, and people like you do. Just reaching out to people directly with your own experiences. And if people just remember those two things: follow therapeutic order, be rational, and live a positive, uplifting lifestyle. Like I said at the end of my lecture, the number one predictor of a long life isn't if you smoke, isn't how you eat, it's how you think. Are you optimist or are you cynical? Do you practice an unconditional positive regard, or does everything suck all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And that made the biggest impact on longevity, was an attitude of unconditional positive regard, also known as optimism, kindness.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the basics of it. You can really get through any problem with the information that's available to us today if you just know how to apply it in the right order. And I see a lot of people coming in already having healed themselves, and they just need me to like continue their prescription or supply them with the supplements they need, and it's pretty amazing to see.
Wow. You were all becoming our own little doctor, essentially,
Yeah, I
And
had a lady come in. She had cured herself of chronic fatigue syndrome, and I asked her what she did, and she did all the right things. And she had found that she could get 90% better with her own healing, but she needed a small dose of Wellbutrin to continue to stay uplifted, and that she just decided was her brain chemistry.
Mhm.
And so she just came to see me to get a continued prescription, um, and that was it. I didn't have anything else to offer her. She had done all the hard work, and she had also realized that it's a balance of natural and conventional that works best for her. And it was a fascinating visit. I almost felt guilty taking her money because
Mhm.
all I had to do was send in a prescription. She had a perfect lifestyle, perfect spiritual practice. Diet was cleaner than mine. And it was amazing, and she just needed my stamp of approval, basically.
Wow.
And I think we'll see more of that as the information on the internet gets translated into wisdom. Right now there's a lot of information. We're just lacking wisdom, and the wisdom is just applying information in the right order.
Mm. Can we go a little deeper into the therapeutic order? Are you comfortable talking about that and
Sure.
going into how you do it? I mean, I know you touched on it, but why don't we dive a little deeper for people here?
Yeah. So the first level is basically just what I call the things you'll die if you don't do.
Mhm.
Breathing. We'll die within a couple minutes if we don't breathe. So make sure you're breathing. Make sure you're breathing clean air. A lot of people hypoventilate as they sit at their computers and they're kind of, not even thinking about it, just really shallow breaths. They're not getting full, deep breaths, really filling their lungs up and giving the body the very sustenance of life, which is breath. So make sure you're breathing. Make sure you have clean air. Next, is probably water. We'll die pretty shortly without water, within about 3 days usually. So make sure you have access to good, clean water and remember to hydrate daily. Uh,
What
Next,
kind of
surprisingly,
what kind of water do you like for as far as clean? I prefer natural spring water from an aquifer.
yep,
I use findatospring.com. I also buy Shasta spring water, but is that do you agree with that? What's your
yeah,
favorite
I
kind
love
of
spring water.
okay.
Um, you know, for convenience, I have a reverse osmosis filter on my whole house line.
Uh-huh.
So any faucet we use, it's going to have pure water come out. You have to remineralize that. So it goes through our reverse osmosis filter, then it goes through a remineralization tank. So it's a bit of a process. Spring water is good. I just don't like how it always comes in plastic bottles.
Right, right, right.
So I try to
Yeah.
fill up with a glass bottle, like at Whole Foods or something. I use spring water. So mostly for the environmental reasons, I use the reverse osmosis filtration system.
Okay.
Um, Next, after water, surprisingly, it's not food; it's sleep. You can last about 3 weeks without food. You'll die in about a week without sleep. And so it's just sleep deprivation can be deadly. You get less than an average of 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. You're basically walking around drunk. You're that cognitively impaired. So I see a lot of sleep deprivation, and people don't even realize it. And I ask, well, what time you go to bed? Oh, about midnight or one. What time are you getting up? Oh, maybe 6. Got to get to work. You get 5 hours of sleep? Are you crazy? Of
Mm-hmm.
course you feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
You're not depressed. You're sleep
They're
deprived.
essentially dying, right?
Yeah,
A little bit,
yeah. Your body
like
is
0.1%
shutting
each
itself
day.
down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I work a lot on sleep with my patients.
Mhm.
And then comes food and a good clean diet.
What
And
do you like as far as sleep? Sorry to interrupt you. It's just super
yeah, go ahead.
important. So what's your prescription as far as sleep? What kind of supplements are you liking? Foods? What lifestyle? What's your piece of advice here?
Well, my first piece of advice is work on sleep timing.
Mhm.
There's natural rhythms to the day. I tell my patients to get to bed before 10 and to wake up around 6. So 10 to 6, kind of like the old adage, early to bed, early to rise. 10 to 6 is optimal. And if they do that long enough, they don't really need a lot of supplements or anything to help keep them asleep. It's really all about the timing of your sleep patterns and getting into a good habit. Every day, weekend, weekday, 10 to 6, just get into the rhythm. You'll feel so much better. And, the minimum hours I say is 7. There's some studies that I've read that say less than 7 hours of sleep is going to result in an excess of cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and that's going to wreak havoc in your body. It's going to cause weight gain. It's going to wreck your gut. So at least 7. I have them aim for 8, and usually that does the trick. My tricks to sleep quality is to have your room completely dark.
Mhm.
We are made to sleep in caves, in the middle of the night with no lights. So it's complete pitch black. You shouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face. I have blackout blinds, and then I have blackout curtains over my blinds. So when I close up my windows, it's dark,
Mhm.
really dark, and I sleep so much better with that double layer of protection. Um, I have people remove all electronics from their house, or not from their house, from their room, from their bedroom. No TV in the bedroom, no laptop with Netflix going until you fall asleep. I even have people turn their phones into airplane mode and turn off their Wi-Fi
Oh
routers.
yeah, huge, huge.
That's all just invisible spectrum light. Your eyes, don't pick it up, but who knows what that's doing to your pineal gland, which is a very light sensitive organ. So just those basic, kind of lifestyle tips usually will get people some really good quality sleep. Of course,
Mm.
keeping the room cool, clean, quiet, and dark, that's essential. And then for difficulty falling asleep, I really like some sort of product that's got some melatonin and some glycine in it. I use Sleep Reset by Integrative Therapeutics. I have no affiliation with them. It's just a product I like.
What's it called?
It's called Sleep Reset
Sleep
by
Reset.
Integrative Therapeutics.
Okay.
And then for trouble staying asleep, I really like Cortisol Manager by the same company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got some magnolia bark. It's got phosphatidylserine, and it's got some ashwagandha in there.
I love ashwagandha for at
that's great
nighttime.
herb.
It's
And so
unbelievable herb. Yeah.
it really just helps suppress that cortisol surge.
Mm-hmm.
If you find yourself waking up, at 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning, that's probably an early cortisol surge. And you can, one, fix your lifestyle so you're not so stressed. And two, you can take that product and it will help to keep you from waking up in the middle of the night until you can kind of figure out what the true cause of your stress is. Is it your work, your family, or relationship, or something? So those are both good supplements for kind of resetting your sleep cycle, but you should never be dependent on a supplement for sleep. If you are, something's off in your life.
I'm going to interrupt one more time. Every time you say something that sparks my branching, my tree branch here, just to help people out more. You mentioned the pineal gland, and just so people know, the pineal gland secretes and produces melatonin, and also in spirituality, it's basically the window to the spirit world, according to many esoteric traditions, and the window to the soul, really. So in scientific terms, it does a lot of incredible, important things. And in spiritual terms, a lot of incredible, important things. And most people's pineal glands are just calcified rocks, essentially, in the Western culture because of our diet and lifestyle and our upbringing. So hugely important for health is to decalcify and strengthen and not impair the pineal gland with massive amounts of Wi-Fi and EMFs while you're sleeping. So just wanted to point that out there for the audience, and you can continue moving forward on what you were talking about. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it. It's breathe, drink, sleep, and then eat. I there's so much different information about nutrition. I just have my patients stick to a healthy diet, preferably whole foods based, mostly organic, in a way that feels good to them. Nutrition is one area where you can never be dogmatic because it differs so much by an individual. Some people feel better on paleo. Some people feel better quasi paleo. Some people really need to get some carbohydrates, and they really feel better on those whole grains. I tend to lean more towards that quasi paleo. And then, of course, not just what you eat, but the timing of how you eat is important. I practice intermittent fasting, so only eating during an 8-hour window. And then if I need to lose weight, which I do now, every other day I do a low-calorie day, about 600 calories.
Okay.
So intermittent fasting is much preferable rather than trying to just futz with your food type or go on some crash diet. Just shrink your eating window and stick to those whole foods, those healthy foods. You don't even have to think about it too much. But as far as longevity goes, the intermittent fasting thing's got a lot of very interesting data on it. So I've really been pushing that hard with a lot of my patients. We tend just to eat all day because of the abundance of food in our culture.
And the stress.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that. I'm a big time stress eater. So just having those hours set where I just can tell myself it's a yes or no answer. Can I eat this? Well, what time is it? If it's not between 12 and 8, which is my eating window, the answer is no, just don't eat it. Just have a big drink of water or something. So intermittent fasting has helped tons of my patients who've struggled with yo-yo dieting really get on a consistent weight loss track, and it's also good for longevity, blood sugar control. So good quality food and also good timing of food is important. And that's it. That's the therapeutic order. It's all those. That's the first level. Most people just do that. They don't need to even go to the second level. But the second level would be, vitamins, herbs, and things like that, natural products, replenishing and finding deficiencies and correcting them, like vitamin D, for example, is very common here in the Northwest. So that'd be level 2. Level 3, nutraceuticals, still natural, but it's very concentrated. And then level up to pharmaceuticals, and then level up to surgical intervention and what we call heroic medicine, which is very, very rare that you should need that. Unless, of course, you're in a car accident, then you go straight to that top level.
Right. Another instance where Western medicine is saving lives.
Yeah. I've had my life saved by a surgeon,
Wow.
and several ER doctors. I had a wild youth. Yeah, I
Wow.
like to jump off stuff and climb stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, right there's a time and place also for the therapeutic order. Obviously, if it's an emergency, you're going to go right to the top.
Hmm. That's a really beautiful therapeutic order, and it's interesting because I came up with a similar sort of. I never called it a therapeutic order, but I've come up with a similar order of operations for people, and that's kind of what I first did was like, all right, everybody needs to detox because we're all fucked and we're all toxic. And then I realized, well, maybe that's true, maybe not, but there are so many things that have to be in check before we even start detoxing, start taking a bunch of herbs and supplements, exactly like you're talking about: sleep, water, things like chewing our food thoroughly.
Right.
Nobody understands how you can eat all you want and you can never get healthier if you're not chewing your food thoroughly.
Yeah. Simple stuff.
Simple stuff. And I love that therapeutic order. I'm gonna start using that terminology. I'll credit your name for it though.
Oh, it's not me. That's
Yeah.
part of the core
Hmm.
naturopathic teachings.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
if you Google therapeutic order and naturopathy, you'll find the real list. I kind of paraphrased it.
Uh huh.
And there's some docs who have really wrote books on it, because they feel it's the most important thing in medicine.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a great concept. It's an old concept, and it's one of the naturopathic ideals. It's what sets us apart from conventional doctors.
Mm.
It's not natural versus synthetic. It's therapeutic order that really sets us apart.
Mm. I have a question for you. If you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine. But when I got sick, I went to a bunch of naturopaths, and they honestly they didn't help me.
Yeah.
They did not have the structures in place that you have, the understanding of this whole you know detox and genetics and everything. They really had a very whatever. I don't want to talk shit about them. I just had a limited understanding of the whole spectrum of things. Do you find a big hole in the naturopathic world? Do you see a hole? What's going on? Why is that happening? And why
Oh
what
yeah.
separates you? Why are you so much more knowledgeable on all this stuff than most naturopaths that I've met with?
That's a huge problem.
Uh huh.
One, naturopathic medicine is only licensed in, I think, 18 states now, maybe 19. I think the new state just added. But more than half the states in America, they don't license naturopathic medicine. So anybody can call themselves a naturopath. And there's a lot of online diploma mills that'll push out a doctorate of naturopathic medicine. It's not accredited, they don't have any hands on experience. And so
Wow.
those guys are straight up practicing medicine without a license. And I think it's just horrible.
Wow.
So we need to get licensure regulations passed in all 50 states, so we can assure they at least been to an accredited naturopathic medical school, and that and then we have to take another step up, because that's not enough. I personally don't think that even going to a licensed naturopathic medical school qualifies someone to practice medicine. It should be a requirement that every MD that graduates has to do a residency program. That's really where I learned most of my medicine, is in my residency program. Unfortunately, I think in my class, I think only about 28 out of 100 and something graduates were offered residencies. There's just not that many available, and that's a huge problem. So I'm working in my clinic now because I have a pretty big clinic. I have 11 providers that work for me, and so we are developing a residency program, and we're going to work in conjunction with Bastyr University to start offering an accredited residency where people can spend a year or two practicing medicine along other people who are more experienced, giving them that mentorship and that training, and making sure they don't hurt someone. And there's two ways you can hurt people in medicine. You can give them something that hurts them, or you can not give them something at their time of need. You can
Mm.
miss giving them something. And that happens a lot in naturopathic medicine. They go, I've seen it a ton. I've seen people come to me and they saw a naturopath, and the naturopath was like, "Oh, you have a gluten sensitivity," and and they come to me, and I'm like, "Oh, you have lymphoma," and this is
Mm-hmm.
a huge miss
Mm-hmm.
and borderline, malpractice. Um, and so it's a big problem, and I'm definitely known to be somewhat critical of my own profession because of that. Um, I come from that privileged perspective of having got a residency opportunity, but I really wouldn't have felt um, comfortable practicing medicine without that. So I think that needs to become mandatory, and that'll improve the quality of care across the board in naturopathic medicine, and it will make sure that nobody who's not truly a naturopathic doctor calls themselves a naturopath. So we need
Mm.
licensure, and we need more residencies, and the schools need to tighten up the admittance. It's a little too open door policy. A lot of people
Wow.
who I went to school with, they would ask me a question, and I would look at them like, I learned that in sixth grade. Why don't you know this?
Wow.
You
You're
know?
about to be an ND. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of them came from liberal arts backgrounds and they just didn't have the science training. And I disagree with that. I
Mm.
think that medicine, it's not a strict science. It's still an art form, but it's informed by science. And you need to be scientifically literate to be a good doctor. And there's a lot of scientific illiteracy within the naturopathic profession. I find very disheartening, and makes them susceptible to pseudoscientific ideas, and it causes the conflict within the profession, and it causes confusion within our patient base, because one naturopath will say this, another patch will come to me and I'll be like, nah, I don't really agree with that.
Mm.
And so we need a better standard of care as well. Kind of come to a consensus. I'm not a big fan of homeopathy. I'd like to see that just go bye bye.
Nixed. What's
Yeah.
you're just not seeing any therapeutic benefit to it.
No, I don't see a lot of therapeutic benefit to
Uh-huh.
it. I think that the studies done on it are in large part negative. They don't show that they actually work,
Hmm.
and I think it's somewhat unethical because it's just essentially a placebo.
Water.
Yeah, it's water and dextrose for the most
Yeah.
part. And even though you hear a lot of anecdotal studies where where people say, "Oh, well, I gave it to this person and they felt amazingly better." Well, when you say something's a placebo, it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Hmm.
Placebo works. It's just not ethical to give people placebos and tell them it's medicine,
Hmm.
even though it works. It works like 30% of the time, but the effects are generally going to be short-lived. The placebo effect is not a long-lasting effect,
Hmm.
but they're basically preying on the placebo effect, and just perpetuating this idea that it's got a strong basis. And lately, they're trying to even show that it has a scientific basis, which it absolutely does not.
Mm.
So I would like to see that. I'd like to see that go away. Um, and there's been a lot of meta-analyses on homeopathy that just says it doesn't simply work. I mean, if we're going to be in the scientific community, we have to be willing to accept those kinds of studies and not be so emotionally attached to these traditional therapies. Um, and there's a big anti-vaccine movement within the naturopathic profession. It makes the anti-vaccine sentiment makes it really hard for us to get accepted within the mainstream medical community, because there is a mountain of evidence that shows that vaccines are a high yield, low risk intervention. It's not zero risk,
Mm.
but it's low risk and it's very high yield. And so a lot of docs don't understand that, and unfortunately are encouraging people not to get vaccinated. And we're seeing a surge in whooping cough in
Mm.
Washington State right now
Mm.
as a result of that. And that's a whole other topic. I know a lot of people go nuts when they hear me
Yeah.
say that I like vaccines.
You just cracked open a can of worms. Yeah.
Oh, a huge can of
Yeah.
worms.
Do you have
Um,
another 3 hours or no?
yeah, that's at least a 3 hour discussion.
Yeah.
But I would encourage people, just to evaluate the data, and not read blogs, but look at the primary research.
Mm.
Um, and again, don't be dogmatic in your beliefs.
Mm.
I started out being, anti-vaccine just based on what I'd read in books and on the internet. And I had my own kids, and I had to make those hard choices. And so I spent the last 10 years. My oldest kid's 14 now. Really studying that and asking myself, am I making the right decision?
Mm.
Endorsing this over and over again. I've read over 112 studies about the relation of vaccines and autism and neural inflammation. And my endorsement is still the same.
Mm.
Follow therapeutic order. Don't vaccinate sick kids. Don't vaccinate undernourished kids. Make sure you're looking at the genetic pitfalls, family history of reactions. Do everything you can to mitigate risk. But the risk of these diseases coming back to our population are still um, outweigh that small risk of vaccination.
Mm.
So, people are wanting us to say, "Oh, vaccines are 100% safe." They're not. They're absolutely not. There's definitely side effects that happen, but they're very mild for the most part. Serious adverse events have happened, and they've been hard to create a causal relationship to the vaccines. There's been some correlation, but causation's never been proven. You can also correlate the increasing consumption of organic foods with the rate of autism. So you can correlate just about anything if you put the right graphs together.
Mm.
And that's the problem. There's a lot of correlation with the onset of symptoms and vaccination. But again, don't want to dive into that because I got my next patient waiting for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But
what do you,
just leave you with that can of worms.
yeah. Do you have a 1 o'clock appointment?
What's that?
Do you have a 1 o'clock appointment? You do? Okay, yeah. We'll wrap it up. I have so much to say on the subject, and you're like basically throwing it all at me, and I can't even defend myself here.
I kind of did that. I kind of did that to the group in Washington. That lecture. If someone asked me a question of vaccine, and I was like, "Yeah, go for it." And they're like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I mean, I have a different perspective on it, but I have a fraction of a scientific understanding that you do. So, I mean, I'm in no position to argue. But for me, I know I had Guillain-Barré as a child, and there's a huge.
Yeah, that's one of the adverse reactions that can happen.
Exactly. I almost died. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Way to take one for the country there. Josh.
Very rare, right? A very rare reaction, apparently.
It's a very rare reaction.
Yeah.
It's extremely rare.
Yeah.
But you got it, and so
Yeah.
you're definitely going to be biased by that for the rest of your life, and
Exactly.
justifiably so.
Yeah.
I have horrible reactions to flu vaccines. So when I read the data that says most people don't react, I'm like, yeah, but I hate it. So we have to overcome those personal experiences, for the good of the community. But one thing, a good resource that I'll just throw out there is myself and some other naturopaths have put together a website. It's called NDs for Vaccines. Just Google that term. And we have very well cited, very well researched papers on each topic that you can read through and get a good unbiased perspective. Because we're all naturopaths who have come to an understanding that, vaccines are a high yield, low risk intervention. And we're trying to just improve the public education in that regard.
Beautiful. I want to let you go, but Dr. Sage Wheeler, where can people find you? Website, Facebook? Do you have any of that stuff?
Yeah. Just look for Sage Med. It's all one word. SAGEMED. Our website is sagemed.co.
Okay.
And we're on Facebook at Facebook/SageMed.
Perfect. And yeah, man, I'll be in Washington in the next 6 months or so we'll have to get together. And it was a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for coming.
It was nice talking to you. Have a good night.
Awesome. All right. Take care.